On the 5th anniversary of his marriage, Edmund Dacre lifted his glass to his mistress and thanked her for making his ancestral home worth returning to. His wife stood 12 feet away, while 140 guests watched the candlelight tremble upon her untouched champagne. Before winter ended, the Duke of Caulder would discover that every mortgage, bond, and unpaid note bearing his signature belonged to the woman he had humiliated. This was a story of broken vows, quiet arithmetic, and a duchess who learned that debt could be purchased though dignity could not. Rain pressed against the tall windows of Caulderwick Hall, carrying the smell of wet leaves and chimney smoke into the ballroom each time a servant opened the terrace doors. Damp wool steamed beneath embroidered coats. Beeswax candles softened in the painted ceiling, while crushed orange peel scented the punch bowls, and 300 white roses concealed the mildew creeping along the northern wall. Octavia Dacre, Duchess of Caulder, stood beneath the musicians' gallery in a gown the colour of frost. The silver thread at her cuffs caught the light whenever she moved her hands. She kept them folded at her waist, because her left glove had begun to split beneath her thumbnail. No one could see the broken seam, but the small pressure of it kept her upright. 5 years earlier, almost to the hour, Edmund had placed a gold ring upon that same hand. He had needed her father's money. She had needed the protection of his name after every respectable drawing-room in London had remembered that Gideon Tressal began his life weighing sacks of flour at a river-side warehouse. The marriage had been negotiated in 12 days. Respect had been promised, affection had not. Octavia had believed respect might be enough. At the centre of the ballroom, Edmund raised his glass higher. He was 38, broad-shouldered, and handsome in the severe manner of men who had never been required to question their own importance. The dark blue ribbon of the garter crossed his evening coat. His black hair remained thick at the temples, and his smile had once made Octavia forget that every clause of their courtship had been examined by solicitors. Mrs. Cressida Pell stood beside him. The widow wore crimson satin, though the Duchess had requested pale colours for the anniversary ball. A diamond and ruby comb held Cressida's auburn hair above her neck. Octavia recognised the diamonds. They had belonged to Edmund's grandmother and should have remained locked in the family cabinet. To Mrs. Pell, Edmund declared, "whose taste has restored warmth to Caulderwick, and whose loyalty has made this house bearable." The musicians lowered their bows. A footman stopped pouring wine. Beyond the windows, rainwater rattled through a cracked gutter. Edmund's gaze found his wife across the ballroom. His expression held neither apology nor uncertainty. The words had not escaped him after too much champagne. He had rehearsed the insult. "A wife may carry the name," he continued, "but it takes another kind of woman to give an old house life." 3 gentlemen laughed before they remembered where they stood. Their wives stared into their glasses. Lady Hester Mowbray covered her mouth with her fan, though whether to hide delight or horror was impossible to tell. Cressida lowered her lashes. "You are too generous, Your Grace." "Not nearly generous enough." The guests drank because a duke had commanded a toast. Octavia did not. The glass stem pressed into her palm. She could hear the small sounds that followed public cruelty: silk shifting, fans opening, whispers caught behind gloved hands. She smelled candle grease, damp stone, and the roses Edmund had bought on credit to celebrate a marriage he had just mocked. A drop of champagne slid over the rim of her glass. She did not scream, not yet. Lady Hester approached with the cautious expression one offered a wounded animal. "My dear," perhaps his grace meant only that Mrs. Pell arranged the flowers. Octavia looked toward the ruby comb in Cressida's hair. "Then the flowers have become remarkably expensive." Lady Hester's fan stopped moving. At that moment, Silas Wardle, the estate steward, appeared beside the ballroom doors. He had served Edmund's father and had known Octavia since the week she first arrived at Caulderwick. Rain darkened the shoulders of his old black coat. His usually careful hair clung to his forehead. He carried no tray, letter, or household book, yet his fingers were stained with ink. "Your Grace," he said quietly. Octavia saw fear in his face. Is someone ill? No, your grace. There is a gentleman waiting in the library. He says he must speak with the Duke before midnight. Who is he? Mr. Latham, clerk to Sir Matthew Strake. Sir Matthew was a private lender whose name appeared on bills respectable men preferred not to discuss. Octavia glanced toward Edmund. He had bent close to Cressida, his mouth near her ear. Does his grace expect him? She asked. I believe he has been avoiding him. Wardle pushed a folded card into her hand before bowing. The message contained 9 words. Ask his grace what falls due on Lady Day. Octavia read the line twice. Lady Day was 4 months away, on the 25th of March. Leases began, rents became payable, servants were hired, and debts matured upon the old quarter day. Her father had taught her those things before he taught her to dance. What sum? She asked. Wardle looked past her toward the ballroom. I cannot safely say here. Then where? The old muniment room, after the last guest has gone. A burst of laughter rose near Edmund. Cressida had placed one hand upon his sleeve. Wardle's voice dropped further. You must come alone, your grace, and you must not tell the Duke. Octavia closed her fingers around the card. For 5 years, Edmund had barred her from estate meetings because accounts were not, as he put it, suitable occupation for a duchess. Yet each autumn, tenants came to Octavia when roofs leaked or cattle died. Each winter, tradesmen waited near the servants' entrance, pleading for invoices that remained unpaid while Edmund bought hunters and entertained Cressida in London. Octavia had believed the disorder came from arrogance. Wardle's face suggested something worse. Edmund struck the side of his glass with a dessert spoon. My friends, the first dance after supper belongs to the woman whose genius created this evening. He offered his hand to Cressida, not to his wife. The orchestra began a waltz. Cressida's crimson skirt opened like a fresh wound as Edmund turned her beneath the chandeliers. Octavia placed her champagne upon a passing tray. She walked between the watching guests, her spine straight and her chin level. Edmund saw her approaching and misread her composure as submission. Octavia, he said, you have not congratulated Mrs. Pell. The white roses are impressive. Cressida smiled. They came from France. On credit, I expect. Edmund's fingers tightened around Cressida's hand. This is neither the time nor the place. You chose both the time and the place, your grace. A silence opened around them. Octavia drew the ruby comb from Cressida's hair. Pins scattered across the polished floor. Auburn curls slipped onto Cressida's shoulders. One guest gasped. Edmund caught Octavia's wrist, but she had already turned the comb, so the small engraved falcon upon its setting faced him. That belonged to your grandmother, Octavia said. It was listed in the marriage settlement as part of the Caulder family jewels. Mrs. Pell may arrange your flowers, your grace. She may arrange your dinners and your journeys to London. She will not wear property placed in my keeping. Cressida's face lost its colour. Edmund released Octavia as if her skin had burned him. You shame yourself. No, that appears to be the one task you prefer to perform personally. She placed the comb inside her reticule. Then she left the Duke of Caulder, standing beneath 140 pairs of eyes. Behind her, Edmund ordered the musicians to continue. The waltz resumed with 2 wrong notes, then steadied. Octavia climbed the servants' staircase rather than pass through the crowded entrance hall. The narrow stone steps were cold beneath her satin slippers. Grease smoke clung to the walls, and water dripped from a roof beam into a copper pan. At the landing, she opened Wardle's card again. Ask his grace what falls due on Lady Day. A wife might have carried Edmund's name, but a creditor could carry away everything beneath it. By spring, the men who had applauded his toast would wait upon Octavia's signature. The muniment room lay behind the oldest section of Caulderwick Hall, beyond a chapel no one used, and a corridor where the plaster smelled of perpetual damp. At 2:30 in the morning, Octavia entered carrying a single lamp. Wardle waited beside an oak table. Bundles of documents filled the room from floor to ceiling. Some dated from the reign of Queen Anne. Others were scarcely a month old. Their ribbons had faded from red to brown, and dust lay thick upon the deed boxes. On the table rested a ledger bound in grey leather with silver corners. Octavia had seen it once before. Her father had given it to Edmund as a wedding gift, declaring that a household honestly accounted for was a household honestly governed. Edmund had laughed and passed it to his steward. Wardle opened the ledger. "Your marriage portion amounted to £90,000, he said. "I remember the sum. 40,000 discharged the mortgage left by the old Duke, 20,000 repaired the Western farms, and settled unpaid wages. The remainder was meant to form a reserve." Was meant to? His Grace removed it in 3 installments. The cold in the room seemed to pass through Octavia's gown. For what purpose? Wardle turned several pages. Columns of black figures marched beneath headings for stables, improvements, travel, and household expenditure. Some financed a coal venture in Durham. Some businesses at Newmarket. Nearly £8,000 went toward the lease and furnishing of a house in Curzon Street. Mrs. Pell's house. Yes, Your Grace. Octavia placed both palms upon the table. The silver corner of the ledger bit into her skin. "How much does Caulderwick owe?" Wardle gave her a sheet. The first obligation was a note for £36,000 held by Sir Matthew Strake, secured against timber and rents from 3 unentailed farms. The second was a mortgage of £44,000 held by Gresham and Lowe, bankers of Lombard Street. A collection of smaller debts followed: 6,000 to builders, 4,000 to wine merchants, 3,000 to a jeweller, 12,000 borrowed through a broker named Rufus Pell, Cressida's brother-in-law. The total stood at £111,740. Octavia read the figure without blinking. What happens on Lady Day? Sir Matthew's note falls due. Gresham and Lowe may demand payment if His Grace defaults upon any other secured obligation. Mr. Pell's agreement carries interest of 14%. That is ruinous. His Grace believed the coal venture would return twice its cost. And did it? The mine flooded in June. A log shifted in the small grate, sending sparks beneath the guard. Octavia turned another page. Purchases for roof slate appeared vis-à invoice for silk wall coverings. Repairs to a tenant bridge cost 5 times what Wardle remembered paying. A shipment of French wine had been recorded as drainage equipment. Who entered these figures? The household secretary, Mr. Pritchard, on bills approved by Mrs. Pell. Why would Edmund allow her to approve bills? Because she told him economy was vulgar. Octavia's mouth hardened. What has he arranged with Sir Matthew's clerk tonight? A delay of 8 weeks, in exchange for another £5,000 and the right to seize the East Lowmeadow farms without further notice. 32 families lived upon those farms. Does Edmund understand what he signed? He understands that Sir Matthew will not trouble him before Christmas. A sound came from the corridor. Footsteps scraped over the flagstones. Wardle closed the ledger and extinguished the lamp. Darkness pressed against Octavia's face. The air smelled of dust and hot metal. The handle moved once. A man's voice muttered beyond the door. Locked. It was Pritchard. Another voice answered him. A woman's voice, Cressida. Then Wardle still has the key. Search his office before morning. Their footsteps retreated. Wardle waited until the corridor fell silent before relighting the lamp. They are looking for this, he said, touching the silver ledger. Why? Because I began marking the false invoices. He showed her a series of tiny crosses beside household purchases. The marked entries amounted to £14,600. Octavia examined the ink. They have been stealing from him. From the estate, Wardle corrected gently. And from you. He reached beneath the table and produced a tin document box. There is one more matter. Your father's final will. Octavia had received her inheritance 2 years earlier. £75,000 in railway shares, government consols, and a modest interest in trestle shipping. Edmund had demanded she place it at his disposal. She had refused. He had not forgiven her. Wardle laid the will beside the ledger. Under the Married Women's Property Act of 1882, the inheritance belonged to Octavia as though she were unmarried. She could hold it, contract against it, and bring legal proceedings in her own name. Her father had died 6 weeks after the act came into force. Gideon Trestle had understood exactly what he was leaving his daughter. His Grace cannot take those funds without your consent, Wardle said. He no longer wants my consent. He wants my ignorance. What will you do? Octavia looked at the debts again. The obligations were frightening only while they belonged to other men. A note could be assigned, a mortgage could be purchased. Creditors who feared lengthy proceedings against a heavily settled ducal estate might accept less than the face value in exchange for immediate payment. Her father had bought distressed shipping debts in precisely that manner. He had taught Octavia to judge the security beneath a desperate man's pride. "How much would Sir Matthew take for his note tonight?" she asked. Wardle's grey eyebrows rose. "I could not say, then find out without using my name. Your Grace, if the Duke discovers, he toasted his mistress before my guests while wearing a coat paid for by my father. Discovery no longer frightens me." Wardle looked at her for several seconds. "The winter will be difficult." "For whom?" "For all of you." Octavia closed the silver ledger. "No, Mr. Wardle, only for those who have mistaken silence for helplessness." Before breakfast, she wrote to Abel Mercer, her father's former solicitor. The letter contained 3 instructions. He was to come to Caulderwick without announcing himself. He was to examine every obligation listed in the enclosed schedule, and he was to tell no one, least of all Edmund, that the Duchess of Caulder intended to become her husband's largest creditor. Abel Mercer arrived 2 days later in a mud-spattered carriage carrying an umbrella, 2 legal bags, and the expression of a man who trusted documents more than human beings. Octavia received him in the old schoolroom. The chamber had no connection to her private rooms, and Edmund had not entered it since childhood. Chalk dust still clung to one wall. Rain tapped the leaded windows, and a weak fire smelled of green wood. Mercer placed his spectacles upon his narrow nose. "You propose to buy debts amounting to more than £100,000. I propose to buy every obligation since secured against the estate. You have 75,000 in separate property. I also possess shares in Trestle Shipping. Those provide your annual income. Then we shall avoid selling them, unless required." Mercer studied her face. "Sir Matthew may accept 28,000 for his note if approached before he learns of the East Lowmeadow agreement. Gresham and Lowe will demand more. The tradesman should be paid in full. Why? Because the builder must pay his masons, and the jeweller has already dismissed 2 apprentices. Their distress should not finance your advantage." "Agreed." Mercer's mouth softened by the smallest degree. "The bank mortgage is more complicated. Much of Caulderwick is held under strict settlement. The Duke cannot sell the principal seat or the entailed lands. However, income from several farms, the London house, and the Western timber have been pledged. Can the mortgagee appoint a receiver over those rents? Upon default, yes. And if I own the mortgage, you could appoint one. Mr. Wardle would serve." Mercer removed his spectacles and polished them. "Your father once told me that you understood accounts better than either of your brothers." "My brothers agreed, provided no one else heard it. Your husband will call this treachery." "My husband financed his mistress with my marriage portion. A court will distinguish between immorality and illegality. I have no intention of taking his mistress to court for immorality." Octavia turned the silver ledger toward him. "These invoices may prove fraud." Mercer examined the tiny crosses. One bill charged £600 for repairing a glass house that had stood roofless for 7 years. Another listed 800 yards of damask for bedrooms that remained papered. £3,000 in jewellery had been concealed beneath payments to a stone contractor. Who approved these? Mrs. Pell. Who signed the orders? Edmund. Then he may have been foolish rather than defrauded. Look at the handwriting beside his signature. Mercer leaned closer. The orders contained a series of initials. R.P. Rufus Pell had acted as broker, supplier and recipient. Mercer closed the ledger. You will need originals from the tradesmen and bank records, showing where the funds went. Can you obtain them? I can ask. Men answer questions more readily when immediate payment accompanies them. He wrote several figures upon a sheet. If we begin with Sir Matthew, your identity must remain concealed. He may raise the price if he learns a duchess wishes to save her home. I am not saving Edmund's home. What are you saving? Octavia looked through the wet window toward the East Lowmeadow fields. Smoke rose from tenant cottages beyond the trees. Somewhere in that rain, children slept beneath roofs. Edmund had wagered against a flooded mine, the part of Caulderwick that never belonged to him alone. Mercer departed through the kitchen yard. That evening, Edmund entered Octavia's sitting room without knocking. Cressida's perfume clung to his coat. It smelled of tuberose and bitter almond. I am told an unfamiliar carriage was seen near the north wing. A solicitor visited Mr. Wardle. Why? A tenant boundary. Edmund poured himself brandy without being invited. You embarrassed Mrs. Pell. She wore my property. Those diamonds belong to the Caulders. I am the Duchess of Caulder. You mistake a title for authority. He spoke lightly, but his fingers were white around the glass. Octavia folded the letter she had been reading. And you mistake possession for solvency. The brandy stopped halfway to his mouth. What does that mean? Only that French roses are a poor investment when one's gutters leak. Edmund set down the glass. Stay out of my accounts. Our accounts. Your father purchased you a coronet. He did not purchase the right to govern my estate. Octavia rose. No, you sold me that right yourself when you took £90,000. His face sharpened. For a moment the civilized polish fell away, and she saw the desperation beneath it. You will leave for Dacre Lodge after Christmas. The lodge is unheated. Then take more blankets. My marriage settlement grants me residence at Caulderwick. I am asking you as your husband. You toasted your mistress as mistress of this house. You may ask her to obey you. Edmund stepped close enough that the tuberose perfume stung Octavia's throat. You will regret provoking me. Before or after Lady Day? His breath caught. The answer was enough. He left without his brandy. 3 mornings later, Abel Mercer purchased Sir Matthew Strake's £36,000 note for £27,500. The deed of assignment named Octavia Dacre, Duchess of Caulder, as the new lawful holder. It was the first debt. It was not the last. Snow came early to Caulderwick. By the 2nd week of December, the lake had frozen around its reeds, and the sheep crowded close to stone walls for shelter. Wind travelled beneath doors and carried powdered snow through gaps in the servants' passage. Octavia began rising before dawn. She met Wardle in the estate office while Edmund slept. Together they examined leases, grain accounts, drainage maps and wage books. The Duke had reduced roof repairs, but doubled expenditure upon his stable. 12 tenant cottages required new thatch. A bridge over the Caulder Beck had become unsafe for loaded carts. The estate owed 2/4 of wages to forestry men. Octavia paid the wages from her private income. She did not call it charity. In exchange, Mercer arranged for each paid claim to be assigned to her. The amounts were small, but the signatures mattered. When a widow named Mrs. Stannick came to the office with a rent demand folded in her apron, Octavia saw Rufus Pell's mark at the bottom. His man says we must leave by 12th night, Mrs. Stannick said. My eldest is at sea, your grace. There's only me and the 2 girls. The cottage stood upon East Lowmeadow. Edmund had pledged its rent to Sir Matthew Strake. The note now belonged to Octavia. No one will remove you, she said. Mrs. Stannick twisted the paper. Mr. Pell says the Duke ordered it. Mr. Pell is mistaken. That afternoon, Octavia rode to East Lowmeadow through snow deep enough to reach her mare's fetlocks. Wardle followed on a sturdy cob. At every cottage, Octavia collected the new rent notices and replaced them with receipts extending payment until harvest. The tenants watched her from doorways with guarded faces. For 5 years, they had seen the Duchess arrive in a carriage at Christmas with blankets and baskets. They had never seen her carry lease books. At the final farm, a boy of 10 held a lantern while Octavia examined a collapsed cowshed. The child's fingers were blue. Your gloves, she said. Lost one, your grace. Then why are you not wearing the other? He looked embarrassed. It seemed selfish to keep one hand warm. Octavia removed her own fur-lined gloves and gave them to him. Wardle watched in silence until they mounted again. "His Grace will hear of this," he said. "He hears only what Mrs. Pell finds amusing." The Duke heard before dinner. Edmund waited in the entrance hall, still dressed from riding. Snow melted upon his boots and darkened the marble floor. "By whose authority did you alter the East Lowmeadow rents?" "By the authority of the creditor who holds them. Sir Matthew gave you no such power." "Sir Matthew no longer holds the note." The colour drained from Edmund's face. Octavia handed her wet cloak to a footman. "Who does? I am not obliged to discuss another person's business. It is my land. It is your debt." He followed her toward the staircase. "Have you been speaking with Strake?" "I have been speaking with the families you intended to put into the snow." The notices were Pell's suggestion. Empty cottages can be leased at higher rents. To whom? Men who can pay. Men who can pay do not choose leaking roofs beside a flooded field. Edmund caught the banister, barring her path. "You know nothing of estate management. I know that your finest hunter eats enough oats each week to feed Mrs. Stannick's household for a month. Do not lecture me like a warehouse clerk. My father's warehouse clerks were paid on time." A door opened at the far end of the hall. Cressida entered wearing a velvet walking dress trimmed with sable. Her gaze moved from Edmund to Octavia. "There you are," said. "The sleigh is ready." Edmund did not look away from his wife. "Who bought Strake's note?" Octavia climbed one step. "That is the question keeping you awake, is it?" Cressida's smile thinned. "Edmund, must we discuss bills in the entrance hall? The Duchess has interfered with East Lowmeadow. Then have Wardle reverse it. I dismissed Wardle this morning." Octavia turned. The old steward stood near the outer door. His leather case rested at his feet. "You dismissed him? He betrayed my confidence." Wardle removed the estate keys from his pocket. "I was instructed to leave before sunset, Your Grace." Edmund held out his hand. Octavia took the keys first. They were heavy, cold, and worn smooth by generations of stewards. "Mr. Wardle is employed from this moment as manager of my separate property," she said. "Your property?" Edmund demanded. "Mrs. Stannick's debt, the forestry wages, and several outstanding estate obligations now belong to me. Someone must administer them." Cressida gave a soft laugh. "A handful of unpaid bills hardly makes a duchess a banker." Octavia looked at her. "No, but they make her a creditor." Cressida's laughter ceased. Wardle bowed to Octavia, collected his case, and moved toward the servants' corridor. Edmund's voice followed him. "If you enter my estate office again, I shall have you arrested." Wardle paused. Octavia placed the keys in her reticule. "He will not need your office. The records are coming to mine." Edmund stared at her as though she had begun speaking in a foreign tongue. For the first time in their marriage, he had no command prepared. That night, someone forced the lock upon Wardle's former office. The silver ledger was not there. Cressida Pell began asking questions before the broken lock had been repaired. She called upon tradesmen in Caulder village. She sent Pritchard to the telegraph office twice in one afternoon. Rufus Pell travelled to London and returned with mud to his knees and a bruise beneath his left eye. Octavia learned those details through servants who had once avoided looking directly at her. Public humiliation had altered the household in a manner Edmund had not anticipated. The servants had heard his toast. They had seen the ruby comb removed from Cressida's hair. Silence changed allegiance. Mercer returned on the 19th of December with news from Gresham and Lowe. "The bank is concerned," he said. "Sir Matthew's quiet sale has made them suspect a hidden weakness. Will they sell? They will consider 35,000 for the £44,000 mortgage if payment is made before the end of January. Offer 32. They may refuse. Then remind them that foreclosure against strictly settled land may take years." Mercer placed another document upon her desk. "This is more urgent. Rufus Pell has offered the bank a new arrangement. He intends to consolidate the debts through a foreign investment house." "At what rate?" 16%, with the Western Timber, London house, and future rents as security. Edmund cannot be that desperate. He can be that proud. The paper bore Edmund's signature beneath an agreement scheduled for execution on New Year's Eve. If completed, the bank mortgage would pass into hands Octavia could not reach. The new lenders could strip every unentailed asset, and Rufus Pell would receive a commission of £4,000. Does Cressida know? Octavia asked. Her name appears nowhere. That means she knows everything. A log cracked in the fireplace. From the adjoining room came the faint sound of paper moving. Mercer raised one finger. Someone was on the other side of the connecting door. Octavia crossed the carpet and turned the handle. Pritchard stood beside a cabinet with an unsealed letter in his hand. He tried to hide it beneath his coat. Wardle appeared behind him and closed the outer door. That letter was addressed to me, Octavia said. Pritchard's mouth opened and closed. Mrs. Pell asked me to bring it to His Grace. Mrs. Pell has no authority over my correspondence. She said you were conspiring against the Duke. Give it to me. He glanced toward Wardle. Octavia stepped closer. You may leave this room as a dismissed secretary, Mr. Pritchard, or remain until a constable arrives to discuss the theft of Her Majesty's post. His hand shook as he surrendered the letter. The seal had been cut. Inside was an offer from Gresham and Lowe. The bank would assign the mortgage for £33,500, provided the transaction was completed within 10 days. Pritchard moved toward the door. Your keys, Wardle said. The secretary dropped them upon the table and fled. Mercer examined the envelope. Mrs. Pell now knows the bank will sell. Then she knows I have 10 days. You would need to dispose of nearly half your government consols. My father bought them at 87. They now stand near 100. You will make a profit, but lose secure income. Octavia opened the small safe behind her desk. Inside lay the Caulder ruby comb, her pearl necklace, a riviere of diamonds, and the emerald bracelet Edmund had given her on their wedding morning. He had fastened it around her wrist and said they might make a tolerable life together if neither expected too much. She took out the diamond riviere. Sell this. Mercer looked displeased. Jewels fetch far less than their supposed value. Then sell the emeralds as well. Those are yours under the settlement. You are not required to sacrifice them. Octavia placed the bracelet beside the necklace. I am not sacrificing anything I wish to keep. On Christmas Eve, Edmund came to her rooms carrying the emerald bracelet. Mercer had offered it discreetly to a London jeweller. The jeweller, hoping for greater advantage, had informed Rufus Pell. Rufus had informed Cressida. Cressida had informed the Duke. Edmund laid the bracelet upon Octavia's desk. What are you doing? Selling a piece of jewellery. To buy Strake's note? She watched his face. He knew. Who told you I purchased it? You have just done so. He swore and turned toward the fire. Octavia closed the account book before her. Do you remember giving me that bracelet? I remember paying for it. My father's marriage portion paid the invoice. Edmund braced both hands upon the mantel. Beyond the windows, bells rang from the village church. Snow softened the sound until it seemed to come from beneath the earth. You mean to ruin me, he said. No, you managed that without assistance. If you purchase the bank mortgage, every newspaper in London will know. The newspapers need not know. Cressida says, of course she does. He turned. Do not speak of her in that tone. What tone should a wife employ for the woman who wears her jewels, opens her letters and profits from loans made against her home? She has stood beside me when you offered nothing but criticism. I offered £90,000. A marriage requires more than money. So does a mistress, apparently. The slap came before Edmund seemed aware that he had raised his hand. His palm struck Octavia's cheek with enough force to turn her face. The bells continued ringing. Neither moved. A red mark spread beneath her eye. Edmund stared at his own hand. Octavia, get out. I did not intend get out. He reached toward her. She pulled the bell rope. Nell Cray, her lady's maid, entered almost at once. Wardle followed from the corridor. Their eyes went to the mark on Octavia's face. Edmund lowered his hand. Tell them it was an accident, he said. Octavia looked at the man she had married. 5 years of indifference had wounded her. His mistress had humiliated her. His debts threatened hundreds of people, but the quiet demand that she protect his reputation broke the final thread between them. "No," she said. One word. Nothing remained beneath it. Wardle opened the door. His Grace was leaving. Edmund's face became rigid. He walked out without another word. Octavia waited until the door closed before sitting. Nell soaked a cloth in cold water and pressed it gently against her cheek. Wardle stared into the fire. "The bank's offer expires in 6 days," he said. "Then send Mercer to London tonight." "Your Grace, it is Christmas Eve." "Banks observe Christmas. Ruin does not." She wrapped the emerald bracelet in brown paper. "Tell him to sell it for whatever it brings." Before New Year's Eve, the mortgage belonged to her. Edmund learned of the assignment when Gresham and Lowe returned his proposed consolidation unsigned. He entered the breakfast room, holding the bank's letter, but Octavia's chair was empty. She had gone to East Lowmeadow to inspect drainage ditches. For 3 days, he avoided her. Cressida did not. She arrived in Octavia's morning room on the 3rd of January without being announced. Her crimson ball gown had been replaced by dove-grey silk, but the perfume remained the same. Octavia continued writing. "You purchased the bank mortgage," Cressida said. "Yes, with money inherited from your father. With my money. Edmund will never forgive you." Octavia sanded the page. "He has not forgiven me for possessing it." Cressida walked around the room, examining the modest furniture as if judging goods at auction. "You think these papers will make him love you?" "No." The answer stopped her. Octavia sealed the letter. "Love has no place in this calculation. Then what do you want?" "The truth." "Truth is a poor comfort in an empty bed." Octavia raised her eyes. Cressida smiled with practiced softness. "He came to me because you made him feel small. Every time you counted a bill, every time you reminded him where the money came from, you diminished him. I was forbidden from seeing his bills. You did not need to see them. Your existence was reminder enough." The insult held more truth than Cressida intended. Edmund had married money he despised needing. Each pound from Gideon Trestle had preserved Caulderwick and deepened Edmund's resentment toward the woman who brought it. Cressida touched a porcelain figure upon the mantel. "He will sign the foreign loan. The offer has lapsed. There will be another lender, not without the consent of the existing mortgagee." For the first time, uncertainty entered Cressida's eyes. Octavia folded her hands upon the desk. "I hold the mortgage, Mrs. Pell. Edmund cannot grant another charge over the same property without notice to me. He cannot sell the Western timber. He cannot assign the rents. He cannot dispose of the London house. He is the Duke of Caulder, and he is in debt." Cressida set down the porcelain figure too hard. Its base cracked against the marble. "Be careful, Your Grace. A woman can own paper and still lose everything that matters. You should know." A footman appeared at the open door. "Mrs. Pell's carriage is waiting." Cressida's gaze remained on Octavia. "This is not finished. No, 4 obligations remain." After she left, Wardle emerged from the adjoining room. He had heard every word. "What 4 obligations?" he asked. "Pell's loan, the wine merchant, the builders, and the jeweller. The tradesmen will accept payment. Rufus Pell will not sell." Wardle placed a fresh account sheet upon the desk. "He may have no choice. His London gaming debts come due in February." "How do you know?" "His former valet now works for your coachman." Octavia almost smiled. A ducal household might leak through its roof, but information travelled through it with remarkable efficiency. Mercer confirmed Rufus owed £17,000 to 2 gaming clubs and a moneylender. His 14% note against Caulderwick had a face value of £12,000. He expected Edmund's new financing to repay it at full value. Without that financing, Rufus needed immediate money. Octavia offered him £8,000. He demanded 13. She waited. He reduced the demand to 11. She waited again. On the 1st of February, a bailiff appeared at Rufus's London rooms. At noon, he accepted £9,200. The debt was assigned to Octavia before sunset. 3 smaller creditors remained. Octavia paid the builders and wine merchant in full. The jeweller produced invoices revealing that Cressida's ruby comb had not been the only family ornament altered at Edmund's order. 2 pairs of Caulder earrings had been broken apart and reset into a necklace. A sapphire brooch had been sold. The jeweller had been told the Duchess approved. He handed Mercer the written authorization. The signature was Octavia's. It was also forged. Cressida's companion disappeared the day Mercer began asking questions. Pritchard left for Liverpool on a ship bound for Boston. Rufus Pell shut himself inside his club, but Cressida remained at Caulderwick. Edmund moved her into the south guest apartments. He had ceased pretending. At dinner on the 10th of February, Cressida sat at the opposite end of the ducal table, wearing the necklace made from the missing earrings. Octavia entered last. Only 6 people had been invited. Lord and Lady Mowbray, Edmund's cousin, Sir Julian Dacre, the local magistrate, and Cressida. Edmund expected polite conversation to bury the scandal. Octavia placed a leather folder beside her plate. Cressida touched the sapphires at her throat. "Do you admire the setting, Your Grace?" "I admired it more when the stones belonged to 2 earrings." Sir Julian coughed into his napkin. Edmund reached for the wine. "This is a private dinner, Octavia. Then Mrs. Pell should not be present." Cressida smiled. "The Duke asked me to remain. Did he also ask you to sign my name?" The wineglass paused at Edmund's mouth. Octavia removed the jeweller's authorization from the folder and passed it along the table. The magistrate examined it first. His eyebrows rose. "This purports to bear Her Grace's approval." "It does bear her approval," Cressida said. "Perhaps she has forgotten." Octavia placed a second document beside it. "This is my signature from the Caulder marriage settlement." The hand upon the jeweller's order leans in the wrong direction. The capital D is formed with 2 strokes rather than 3. Cressida's fingers went to the sapphires. Edmund took the papers. "You authorized the ruby comb to be altered," Octavia said to him. "Did you authorize this necklace?" He examined the forged signature. "No." "Did you know Mrs. Pell's brother-in-law received commissions from the false household invoices?" "No." Cressida turned toward him. "Edmund, this is absurd. Rufus arranged purchases. Tradesmen often pay commissions." "The glasshouse repairs?" Octavia asked. "The 800 yards of damask? The stone contractor who supplied diamonds?" Lady Mowbray set down her fork. Octavia opened the silver ledger. The marked invoices total £14,600. 4,000 went directly to Rufus Pell. 3,000 paid for jewellery now worn by Mrs. Pell. The remainder moved through 2 firms registered to the same address as Rufus's broker. Cressida pushed back her chair. "You have been spying upon me. I examined my own accounts. They were never yours." Octavia looked at Edmund. "Do you agree?" His jaw tightened. Cressida waited for him to defend her. He looked again at the forged signature. "Remove the necklace," he said. "Edmund, take it off." Her hands trembled at the clasp. "You told me I deserved it. I did not tell you to forge my wife's name. I did it for you." Octavia closed at the ledger. There it was. The shield behind which selfish people concealed every theft for you. Cressida tore the necklace from her throat. The clasp broke, and sapphires scattered across the tablecloth. One struck Edmund's plate. Another fell into Lady Mowbray's wine. Cressida stood breathing hard. "You think she has saved you?" she asked Edmund. "She is buying the rope she means to put around your neck." Edmund's gaze moved to Octavia. "How much do you hold?" She could have answered. Instead, she lifted her glass. Enough to make Lady Day interesting. Cressida left the dining room. No one attempted to stop her. Later that night, Edmund came to Octavia's study. A bruise of exhaustion lay beneath his eyes. He closed the door but remained beside it. "Cressida says you hold every major debt." Octavia wrote another figure in the silver ledger. "Cressida has said many things." "How much?" "You will receive a complete schedule on Lady Day. I am your husband. You remembered that title only when you required information." He took 2 steps into the room. "If you call in those debts, you could place Wardle over the rents. You could seize the London house and every unentailed farm, yes. You could sell the timber. Yes, and if I cannot pay?" "You cannot." He flinched. The admission had entered the room too plainly to be denied. "What do you intend to do with Caulderwick?" "Keep the roof standing. This is revenge." "Revenge would be allowing you to continue." He gripped the back of a chair. "I praised another woman at a ball. I behaved cruelly. You answer by taking my estate. You pledged the estate long before the ball, with the expectation that I would recover. Through a 16% loan." His gaze fell. She turned the ledger so he could see the marked invoices. "Your mistress and her brother-in-law stole from you. You struck me when I refused to fund what remained. You dismissed the steward who warned us. You pledged tenants' homes to avoid an uncomfortable conversation. Cressida is leaving. That is no longer a concession. What do you want from me?" Octavia considered the question. 5 years earlier, she might have asked him to come to her room without the smell of another woman upon his coat. 2 years earlier, she might have asked for a place beside him at the estate table. On the night of the anniversary ball, she might have asked him to apologize before the guests. Those wants belonged to a woman who still believed Edmund's choices determined her worth. "I want you to attend the creditors' meeting on Lady Day," she said. "Where?" "The ballroom." His eyes narrowed. "Why?" "The ballroom. Because your affairs will not fit inside the estate office." He left with his face grey. An hour later, Nell discovered that the lock upon Octavia's document cabinet had been cut. The silver ledger was gone. The disappearance threatened more than Octavia's proof against Cressida. Inside the back cover, Mercer had placed the schedule of purchase debts, amounts paid, witnesses, and dates of assignment. Without the original assignments, the ledger alone could not transfer ownership. Those documents remained in Mercer's London safe. But the schedule revealed every part of Octavia's position. Cressida now knew how close she was to defeat. Wardle searched the household. The magistrate sent a constable to the railway station. Edmund ordered Cressida's rooms opened, but her trunks remained unpacked, and she denied taking anything. "You displayed it at dinner," she said. "Any servant might have stolen it." Nell found wax beneath the cabinet, a fragment from a dark green candle used only in the South Guest apartments. It proved little. Then an envelope arrived from Rufus Pell. He possessed the silver ledger. Unless Octavia paid him £20,000 and surrendered the Pell note, the book would be burned. Copies of its most damaging pages would be delivered to newspapers, with the claim that the Duchess had conspired to seize entailed property from her husband through fraud. Mercer read the letter beside Octavia's fireplace. "He cannot prove fraud," he said. "He does not need to. He needs only to create delay. A court could issue an injunction. Before Lady Day? Possibly. That means no." Mercer folded the threat. "Paying him would invite another demand. I shall not pay him. The marked invoices may be lost. The tradesmen have provided statements. The public accusation could still damage you." Octavia stared into the fire. Her strength had depended upon secrecy. Once Rufus exposed the scheme, Edmund's friends might pressure the creditors or challenge the assignments. Newspapers would portray her as a merchant's daughter who had trapped a duke, then used trade money to master him. Cressida understood society well enough to make truth look vulgar. "What does Rufus fear?" Octavia asked. "Prison, poverty, and ridicule, in that order. Can we give him all three?" "Not by Lady Day. Then one will have to suffice." She instructed Mercer to arrange a second meeting with the jeweller. Wardle contacted the wine merchant and stone contractor. Each produced letters from Rufus requesting false descriptions upon their invoices. Rufus's own handwriting connected him to the fraud. The jeweller also revealed that Cressida had ordered the sapphire necklace sold 2 weeks earlier. The stones placed upon the dinner table had been paste copies. The genuine sapphires had been sent to a dealer in Paris. Cressida planned to leave England with the proceeds. Edmund listened while Mercer explained the evidence. He stood beside the library window, watching sleet strike the glass. "I gave her everything she asked," he said. "Yes," Octavia replied. "That is why she kept asking." He did not answer. For the first time, she saw shame settle upon him without turning into anger. His shoulders lowered. His reflection in the window looked older than the man who had raised his glass at the anniversary ball. "Can she be prosecuted?" he asked. "The forged authorization may be sufficient," Mercer said. "Rufus's letters strengthen the case. Recovering the jewels will be more difficult." Edmund pressed his thumb against the edge of the windowsill. "I believed her." Octavia's face remained still. "You wanted to believe her." He turned toward his wife. "Yes." No excuse followed. Outside, the chapel bell marked 4 o'clock. Edmund crossed the library and placed a small iron key upon the table. "This opens the cabinet in my London study. You will find letters from Rufus, loan agreements, and Cressida's household accounts." Octavia looked at the key. "Why give it to me now?" "Because I am beginning to understand the cost of giving it to no one earlier." It was not an apology. It was the first honest thing he had offered her in years. Lady Day arrived beneath a colourless sky. Rain had stopped, but the ground remained sodden. Rooks gathered upon the bare elms surrounding Caulderwick Hall, their calls carrying through the morning mist. At 11 o'clock, the ballroom doors opened. No roses concealed the mildew. No musicians occupied the gallery. A long oak table stood where Edmund and Cressida had danced. Upon it rested document boxes, inkstands, sealing wax, and a row of chairs for the creditors and their representatives. Sir Matthew Strake came out of curiosity, though he no longer owned a note. 2 partners from Gresham and Lowe attended. The builder, jeweller, and wine merchant sat together. Lord Mowbray represented the county. The magistrate arrived with Mercer. Rufus Pell entered last. He carried the silver ledger beneath one arm. Cressida walked beside him in a dark travelling dress. Edmund stood near the fireplace. His coat was plain, without the garter ribbon he had worn at the anniversary ball. Octavia entered through the same doors she had used 5 months earlier. She wore no diamonds. Her gown was deep green, severe and unadorned. The red mark from Edmund's hand had long vanished, but he looked toward the place where it had been. Mercer drew out her chair at the head of the table. Edmund's chair stood to her right. Cressida laughed. "How very theatrical," Octavia sat. "You preferred the room when His Grace provided champagne." Rufus placed the ledger upon the table. "This book proves the Duchess used confidential estate information to purchase obligations below value." Sir Matthew Strake adjusted his cuffs. "I sold my note willingly. You were not informed of the buyer's identity. I was paid immediately." That made her identity remarkably uninteresting. One of the bankers nodded. Rufus opened the ledger. The Duchess of Caulder intended to force her husband from control of his own lands. Mercer placed a document before him. Her Grace purchased lawful assignments using her separate property. The Married Women's Property Act permits her to contract and hold property in her own name. This estate is entailed. The principal seat is. The pledged rents, unentailed farms, timber rights, and London property are not protected from valid charges created by His Grace. Every face turned toward Edmund. He did not move. Rufus's confidence faltered. Cressida stepped forward. "Edmund, you cannot allow this. She means to make you a tenant in your own house." Octavia looked at the silver ledger. "You demanded £20,000 for its return." Rufus shut the book. "I made no such demand." Mercer produced the letter. The magistrate compared it to the false invoices. "The hand appears identical," he said. Cressida's gloved fingers tightened around the back of a chair. "This meeting concerns the Duke's debts, not household quarrels." "Correct," Octavia said. She nodded to Mercer. He opened the first document box. The £36,000 Strake note is held by Octavia Dacre, Duchess of Caulder. A deed was placed upon the table. The mortgage formerly held by Gresham and Lowe, £44,000, is held by Her Grace. A second deed followed. The Pell note, £12,000, is held by Her Grace. Rufus's lips parted. The assigned claims of Caulder Builders, Verity Wines, Belden Jewellers, and 7 estate employees are held by Her Grace. The papers formed a neat row. With accrued interest, Mercer continued. The total obligations under Her Grace's ownership amount to £107,318. No one spoke. Cressida looked at Edmund. This cannot be all of it. There was another bond, the Durham venture. Octavia turned toward her. It was the confirmation she had awaited. The flooded coal venture had issued a private guarantee for £22,000. Edmund claimed the original had been destroyed. Mercer had found no creditor willing to admit holding it. Cressida knew it existed. "Where is the Durham guarantee?" Octavia asked. Cressida's face changed. Rufus seized her wrist. "Be quiet." She pulled free. "You said the Duchess could not touch that bond. Where is it?" Edmund demanded. Rufus stepped back from the table. The magistrate moved between him and the door. Cressida looked from her brother-in-law to Edmund. Whatever devotion she had performed for 5 years vanished beneath the fear of being abandoned with a thief. "Rufus purchased it through another name," she said. "He meant to call it in after the foreign loan was completed." Rufus's face darkened. "You witless woman, you promised me the London house. You were to receive what I chose." Cressida stared at him. The final illusion broke. Rufus had not planned to rescue Edmund. He intended to place the estate in deeper default, call in the hidden guarantee, and seize the unentailed property with his foreign partners. Cressida's promised house had never been hers. Mercer placed a blank sheet upon the table. To whom was the guarantee assigned? Cressida swallowed. Moreland Trading Company. "Rufus Pell controls Moreland," the jeweller said. "He used that name upon my payments." The magistrate faced Rufus. "You will remain while a warrant is obtained." Rufus lunged for the ledger. Wardle caught his arm. The two men struck the table, overturning an inkstand. Black ink spilled across the wood. Edmund seized Rufus by the collar and drove him against the wall. "You meant to take Caulderwick." Rufus's laugh came through clenched teeth. "You gave it away one signature at a time." The words landed harder than any blow. Edmund released him. The magistrate's men entered and removed Rufus through the ballroom doors. He continued protesting until his voice faded down the corridor. Cressida remained beside the table. "Edmund," she whispered. He looked at her travelling dress, the paste necklace at her throat, and the silver ledger she had helped steal. "Leave. Where am I to go?" "You arranged to go to Paris. The money is gone. So is my concern." She reached for him. He stepped away. Cressida turned toward Octavia. "You have won paper and a ruined man. Do you call that victory?" Octavia held her gaze. "No, I call it an account settled." The constable escorted Cressida from the room. The same guests who had watched her dance beneath candlelight now watched her cross the bare floor without jewels, applause, or the Duke's protection. When the doors closed, Mercer placed the final schedule before Octavia. The Durham guarantee raised the estate's total debt to £129,000. Rufus's fraudulent ownership made its recovery uncertain, but the claim could no longer be used in secret. Edmund stared at the figures. "What happens now?" Octavia opened the silver ledger to the page containing his anniversary expenses. White roses, French champagne, musicians, Cressida's crimson gown. He had spent £840 upon the night. He praised his mistress. She turned the ledger toward him. "At our anniversary ball, you said a wife might carry the name, but another woman had given this house life." His eyes closed briefly. Octavia placed 3 documents beside the ledger. "I have made it solvent." The first document appointed Wardle receiver over the pledged rents and estate revenues. The second required the sale of Edmund's London house, racing stable, yacht, and unentailed hunting property. The proceeds would reduce the debt. The third established Octavia as sole manager of the estate accounts. Edmund would receive a fixed allowance until all obligations had been repaid. No loan, sale, lease, or household expense of £50 could be made without her written consent. "You will retain your title," she said. "You will retain residence in the North Apartments. The tenants will retain their homes. The labourers will be paid. The estate will repay every legitimate creditor. And if I refuse, I shall call in the mortgage and appoint a receiver under its original terms. The result will be harsher and far more public." Sir Matthew Strake leaned back in his chair. Edmund looked around the ballroom. 5 months earlier, these men had raised glasses when he humiliated his wife. Now they waited for her decision. His hand moved toward the pen, then stopped. "Why leave me anything?" he asked. Octavia answered without softness. "Because stripping a foolish man of every possession is vengeance. Preventing him from destroying the lives beneath his authority is governance." He lowered his head for several seconds. Only the rooks outside could be heard. Then Edmund signed. The scratch of the nib travelled through the ballroom. He signed the receivership. He signed the sale authorizations. He signed the estate management agreement. When he finished, he pushed the pen toward Octavia. She added her name beneath his. The reversal required no cheer. Every person in the room understood it. The Duke of Caulder still owned his title. His wife owned every debt beneath it. Rufus Pell was charged with fraud, attempted extortion, and conspiracy to obtain property through false instruments. His clubs expelled him before the magistrate completed the first hearing. Cressida returned the genuine sapphires in exchange for Octavia's agreement not to pursue a separate civil claim against her. She left England for Boulogne in a hired cabin and without the house, jewels, or fortune Rufus had promised. Pritchard was detained in Boston and eventually sent back to answer for the stolen correspondence. Edmund sold the London house, 12 hunters, 2 carriages, his yacht, and the hunting lodge. The first proceeds repaired the East Lowmeadow roofs and paid every worker owed wages. The remaining money reduced Octavia's mortgage. He moved into the North apartments without complaint. For 6 months, he and Octavia spoke only at estate meetings. Wardle gave him work no duke had ever performed at Caulderwick, inspecting drainage, negotiating timber prices, and recording repairs without hiding the expense beneath invented names. Edmund made mistakes. He also returned each morning. He ceased wearing his garter ribbon at home. He dismissed friends who mocked Octavia's authority. When Lord Mowbray called the arrangement unnatural, Edmund answered that nothing was more natural than a competent person repairing the damage of an incompetent one. He never asked Octavia to forget the anniversary ball. On the 6th anniversary of their marriage, there was no celebration. Rain struck the windows as it had the year before. Octavia worked alone in the small library, reviewing the winter grain accounts. Edmund appeared at the door carrying 2 plain supper trays. The dining room seemed too large, he said. She continued reading. He set 1 tray at the far end of her desk. "I do not expect forgiveness," he said. "I have no right to ask for it. No, but if you permit it, I would like to learn how to become a husband worthy of the wife I already have." Octavia examined him. The proud man who once demanded obedience had gone. In his place stood someone more uncertain, less polished, and perhaps more honest. "Not a husband," she said. "Not yet," Edmund nodded. "A dinner companion, then." She looked at the second tray. "You may sit." He took the chair opposite her outside. Rain washed the last dead leaves from the terrace. Between them, the silver ledger rested beside 2 bowls of soup, its accounts balanced and its final page waiting for whatever they chose to write next. Thank you for watching Octavia's complete story, a tale of quiet courage, hard-won power, and a woman who refused to let public humiliation define her future. If her journey from discarded wife to the true authority of Caulderwick kept you listening, please give this video a like. It helps the algorithm share our stories with more viewers who love emotional historical drama. Share it with a fellow historical romance lover and subscribe with notifications turned on so you do not miss our next full story of betrayal, reckoning, and redemption. Before you leave, tell us in the comments, would you have offered Edmund a second chance or closed the ledger on him forever?